Because today, what we're talking about is that many people overthink things. There's a lot of overthinking that takes place in the world today. And I often hear from people within teams and organizations, what should I have done differently? You know, people wrestling with the idea in their own leadership or in their culture, what should I have done in this situation or that situation? But many times we also overthink things and make leadership too complicated. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about some reminders to not complicate this term leadership. And then let's think about a few key things that we can do to not overcomplicate leadership. We're going to talk more about that on today's podcast.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are or however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome back. So glad you are here. If you are one of those people that have been around since the very beginning, then welcome back. And if you are new to the podcast, then welcome to Season 5. We are almost at 100 episodes or darn near close. I'm losing track at this point, but we've had so much great energy, so much excitement about the growth of the podcast, and so glad that these messages are being amplified further into the world. This is a place for you to step back, take some time in your day, in your week, to think, to step back, to think about your own leadership actions and certainly the culture that you're creating with everybody in your life and your work. So as always, I hope that this is a place for you to be rejuvenated and to feel some positivity and some space to think about things and stimulate some growth along your path. I'm more convinced of this than ever that authentic leadership and creating compelling cultures are not only needed right now in the world, but they are the things that are helping to bring life and energy to the people around us. So thank you for everybody out there who is listening and that this is contributing to your path. I'm so excited that you are here. If you will do me a quick favor, just a quick favor, and rate the podcast, just take a moment, 5 stars, of course. If you'll leave a nice review on whatever platform you're using, those are the ways in which this gets amplified and people out there can find the podcast more easily. So thank you for everybody who takes the time to do that. I truly appreciate it. That is so helpful. Also, for anybody that shares this podcast with the people on your team or in your network, that's also the way that these things spread, is when other people are invited to be a part of this. So thank you for everybody that takes a moment to do that. I also want to say thank you to anyone out there who was a part of the recent Thermostat Cultures live event, either in person in Columbus, Ohio, or a part of the virtual experience. What a powerful, amazing day it was. It was such a great talk about energy-giving day. So if you didn't listen to the episode that was kind of recapping just some sound bites from the day, I invite you to do that because it was really, really great and fun to celebrate such a great day with so many amazing people. This season on the podcast, we've been focusing on navigating our way through some of these terms that we've been talking about, the future of work, which we've been talking about the fact that all of us together are co-creating the future of work. So there are a lot of people out there forecasting what the future of work is going to be, but the reality is that we all together are going to be the ones to create it. We've been talking about things like the Great Resignation and the Big Shift, the war for talent. We've been talking about remote work and how to lead and create culture that engages the minds and hearts of people in times of rapid change. So hopefully you've been a part of many of those conversations in the past, but welcome back and welcome to the one that we're going to have today. Because today, what we're talking about is that many people overthink things. There's a lot of overthinking that takes place in the world today. And I often hear from people within teams and organizations, what what should I have done differently? You know, people wrestling with the idea in their own leadership or in their culture. What should I have done in this situation or that situation? And talking about leadership nuances will always exist, and certainly leadership precision is important. How do we respond, and what are the actions that we put into practice? But many times we also overthink things and make leadership too complicated. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about some reminders to not complicate this term leadership. Let's not complicate leadership too much. And part of this begins with our mindset. Leadership begins, when we talk about this term leadership, every time we do, I want to make sure that we're talking about the term and bringing the mindset of it to that leadership begins with a desire to serve. It means that to truly lead means to come to it with the mindset that I'm here to serve something that's greater than me, greater than myself, and then I'm also here to serve other people. That leadership really is about putting others in positions to be successful and commit to the growth of other people and, again, to that mission that's greater than self. And we also need to be reminded that we are all thermostats. So we all, as human beings, we're always setting a temperature. And whether you are a leader by title or in some cases, people aren't leaders by titles, but they are a leader in the sense that somebody is always watching them and taking their cues or taking notes on how they respond to something. And so we're all leaders in the sense that somebody is watching us and learning from the way that we respond to the things around us. So we want to be able to think about our response and then to be able to think about, is it the temperature that we want to set? And it's, important and valuable, of course, to think about your own personal response and then to be precise with your own leadership actions. To make sure that it's representing, that people are feeling the temperature that you set around you is the one that you actually want. But we also have to recognize that many of us get caught up in overthinking things and we make this whole leadership thing more complicated than it is. Now, hear me loud and clear. Leadership is not easy. Oftentimes it's easy to not lead, easier to not lead. So leadership isn't easy, no doubt. But also, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's make sure that we dive into if what it means to lead, and then let's think about a few key things that we can do to not overcomplicate leadership. We're going to talk more about that on today's podcast. But first, let's pause just for a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Many teams and organizations right now are realizing they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, bring people back together in person, and continue to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually. So whether you're planning that next event, that power in congregation, the power and the energy that comes from bringing all your people into the same room, into the same space for that important meeting or conference, and you need a powerful keynote speech or facilitated team discussion or facilitated conversation that is the currency for change about leadership, about the culture that you're trying to create together, or the mindset that is needed to navigate all that is in front of you, whether you're planning that in person or you need to do that virtually. I hope that we can be a resource to you and support you in that effort. If so, contact us at jasonvbarger.com, at jasonvbarger.com, if we can partner with you to help engage the minds and hearts of your people in these important times.
Leadership is by no means easy. Again, let me hear me say that loudly and clearly. Leadership is by no means easy. Some ideas certainly sound simple, but it does not mean that they're easy. So, but still, we need to make sure that when we talk about this term leadership, that we don't overcomplicate things. Let's not get ourselves stumbling in our own mental gymnastics about what we ought to do or should have done. And let's make sure that, again, we want to bring nuance And we want to make sure that we are bringing precision and thoughtfulness and intention, certainly, to the actions and the response that we have as leaders. We want to make sure that we're thoughtful about that. But we also don't want to get caught up in all this overthinking and these kind of mental gymnastics that keeps us from ever acting, keeps us kind of paralysis by analysis. So let me just talk about some key reminders for us to not overcomplicate leadership. So when these things happen, what should the response be? So let me just name a couple of these key reminders to us. When your gut says something is up with someone else on your team or throughout your organization or somebody you're dealing with, when your gut says, hey, something's up with them, let's not overcomplicate it. When your gut tells you that something must be going on with somebody, then let the action be as a leader to go to them to serve, to seek them out, to go out of your way to just check in with that person. And the response is to go to them and make sure, hey, I want to just pause for a second. How's everything with you? How you doing? When your gut tells you this, that something might be up with someone, don't sit back and stew over it or assume or brush it under the table. The simple direct action that's not complicated is go to them to serve, seek them out, and just see what might be going out. When there's a lack of clarity, when you sense that there's a lack of clarity either with you or with somebody on your team or throughout your organization, invite conversation. Invite conversation. And then again, don't overcomplicate it. If we sense that there's a lack of clarity, then that means we need to be even better about communicating and clarifying why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Clarifying where is it that we're trying to go next? Clarify how is it that we're committed to traveling with each other? And then clarify, okay, who's doing what? Whenever we feel that there's a sense or a lack of clarity, let's not overcomplicate it as leaders. Let's make sure then we invite conversation and make sure that we lean in to clarify why, where, how, and what. Let's not overcomplicate this leadership thing as well. When we have questions, or when somebody, if you have a question about something, then ask. When we have questions as leaders or even as team members, we need to make sure that if we have questions, don't overcomplicate it. Ask and encourage other people to ask. Don't sit and assume or stew. If you have a question about something, ask the question. Let's not overcomplicate it. If you see something around you that you like, behavior, operations, appreciation, something that you see around you, a behavior or something that a team member or somebody in your organization is doing, and you like something that they're doing, don't overcomplicate it. Tell them. Point it out. Say it. And celebrate it. We've got to appreciate the good stuff that we see in the people around us. And sometimes we can, again, overcomplicate it. If we see something that we like, we've got to make sure that we tell them, we point it out, and we don't just glance by it or turn our focus to something else. On the other hand, if we see something that we don't like, if there's something, that a behavior, an action, a habit, a mode of operation that's happening, then we don't like something, then we also have to be willing to say it. We need to be willing as leaders to be direct and to tell them, to focus on the action, not just the person, but focus on the action. What is it we don't like? What is the development opportunity? What does growth look like? And to remember that being clear with somebody is actually being kind. And so if there's something that we see that we don't like, or we're not appreciating, or we don't think is feeding the culture that we want, then don't overcomplicate it. We got to make sure that we say it. We go tell them. We have a direct and honest and focused conversation, but the conversation's about action, about development, about growth, because that is kind to people. And then lastly, the last reminder I'll remind us of about not overcomplicating leadership is that if there's any lack of understanding of what success might look like, or we're not sure what it is that we're aiming for, then what we need to make sure is don't overcomplicate it. We got to make sure that we take ownership over painting the vision for what success looks like. We've got to make sure, let's not overcomplicate it. Let's boil it down. What will success or growth look like in action and behavior? Let's make sure that we paint that so that people can clearly see this is what kind of success we're looking for next, and this is what it looks like in action and behavior. Sometimes with this term leadership, we can do all kinds of mental gymnastics and sit back and stew and think about and second guess ourselves. Did we do this, or should we have done this or done that? And the reality is let's not overcomplicate it. In so many ways, let's not overcomplicate it. If your gut says something is up with somebody, go to them to serve, seek them out. If you sense that there's a lack of clarity, invite conversation. Clarify the why, the where, the how, and the what. If somebody has questions, or if you have questions about something, ask. And encourage other people to ask. If we have a question, don't sit and assume or stew. Ask the question. If we like something, if we see something that we like, point it out and tell people. Celebrate it. Appreciate the good stuff. If we see something we don't like, say something. Focus on, well, what could we do differently? And then that you're supporting them in growth and in development. And if we're not sure what success looks like, then let's commit. Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's commit to telling the story of what success and growth will look like in action and behavior. Nobody lives in your head, and certainly nobody lives, the people across your team and your organization, nobody lives in your head, and you don't live in anyone else's head. So nobody lives in your head, and others have the same worries oftentimes as other people. So we need to make sure that we don't overcomplicate it, and we communicate directly and honestly with each other. Part of that is the process all the time of calibrating our own personal thermostat, our own awareness, and of how we're feeling and our own response to that. And then also calibrating our social awareness of the people around us and the relationship that we're developing with them and the other members of our team. This is the heart of emotional intelligence. We are the thermostats. And from our own internal temperature that we set, and that as we recognize how we're feeling and how others might be, the response that we put out into the world, our action, our behavior, will set a temperature for the people around us. And so as always, let me leave you with some questions to ponder for today's podcast. In what ways could you be more direct, more simple, more proactive in your leadership style? In what ways could you be more direct, more simple, more proactive in your leadership style? In what ways are you making your interactions or your leadership too complicated? What are the things that are getting in the way and making things too complicated? And therefore, what are the things that you could do to either clarify all those things that we've talked about on today's podcast? So, I hope today has been a great moment for you to step back and think. I hope you'll keep tuning in. On the next episode, we're going to be talking about the fact that gratitude is a superpower. And as we get closer to Thanksgiving, the idea that we need to practice gratitude not only in our own life, but that gratitude can be a superpower throughout our team and throughout our organizations. So remember, the best leaders, teams, and cultures on the planet stimulate progress by recalibrating their thermostat together. What is the temperature that we're committed to setting together?
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.